Coming up on Primetime News, President Park Geun-hye emphasizes medical cooperation with the North and pledges to support Pyongyang with vaccine and antibiotics to tackle global infectious diseases together. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe defends his foreign minister's claim that the phrase forced to work is not equal to the term forced labor. This as Korea's foreign minister dismisses such claims. And today, 4 new duty-free shops in downtown Seoul and Jeju were announced. The first time these coveted licenses are granted in 15 years. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Friday, July 10th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
Today, President Park Geun-hye checked up on how much progress her Unification Preparation Committee has made over the past year and ways to move forward.
She specifically called for interKorean cooperation in healthcare to better ready the peninsula for infectious diseases affecting the globe,
as well as the urgency of helping separated families reunite with their loved ones. Our Choi Yoo-sun starts us off.
Reflecting on the past year since the launch of the Unification Preparation Committee, President Park Geun-hye said it's time to open up a channel of cooperation to take a step closer to peacefully uniting the two Koreas. She said the two Koreas must first and foremost cooperate to protect the people against new infectious diseases rapidly spreading around the world. The president suggested providing vaccines and antibiotics for North Koreans suffering from tuberculosis or rubella. In the long run, she said the two Koreas, along with neighboring countries like China and Japan, would contribute to establishing a firm disease response system in Northeast Asia. In regards to the families separated by the Korean War, President Park said it is urgent to assist them so they can reconnect as soon as possible, stressing that North Korea has been unresponsive to the South's openness to renewed dialogue and cooperation. She said South and North Korean people should have more exchanges to build a sense of shared ethnicity, and that the committee's blueprint for unification should be transparent to ensure citizen participation from both Koreas. Looking ahead, members of the committee presented various ideas and possible projects, including Vice Chairman Chung Jong-uk's proposal of a cultural and tourism belt for the two Koreas, while Unification Minister Hong Yong-pyo, representing the government side, presented plans for a World Peace Forum in October to better promote the benefits of a unified Korea to the global community. Thanking the members for their hard work, President Park asked that they commit to their goals, considering their work as planning routes for a historic and unprecedented process of peacefully ending the 7-year-long division of the two Koreas. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, the National Assembly Standing Committee began deliberating on the government's multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget plan this Friday.
But as the rival parties lock horns over the size of the budget, it's unclear whether the measures will pass the Assembly by the government's target deadline, July 20th. The ruling Saenuri Party wants to pass the $10.4 billion plan, whereas the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy demands around $5 billion be cut from the proposal.
The NPAD conceded that additional funds are necessary due to the MERS outbreak and the ongoing drought, but said it cannot accept the allotment of $5 billion to cover a tax revenue deficit. The ruling party, however, argued that since the goal is to stimulate the economy, the size of the budget must be maximized to yield any substantial effects.
Now, Tokyo continues to weasel its way out of admitting the fact that they forced thousands into slavery and death at the wartime facilities listed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, a move that's further fueling Korea-Japan tensions. Connie Kim has more on Japan's continued quest to distort history.
The Japanese leader says Korea has never objected to its foreign minister's claim that the expression forced to work in the English language translation of its statement to the World Heritage Committee does not mean forced labor. Speaking at a parliamentary meeting on Friday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said the phrase forced to work in the English version of the statement was used to convey that some of the laborers were forced into conscription. Abe also said the Korean government made it clear that it'll not include Japan's statements in its compensation claims for Koreans forced into labor during Japan's colonial rule of Korea. After Tokyo's wartime industrial facilities were listed as UNESCO sites this weekend, Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida sparked tensions between Seoul and Tokyo by giving an ambiguous translation of its statement to its domestic audience. Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se dismissed Kishida's comments, saying the English statement leaves no room for controversy and has been officially adopted by the World Heritage Committee. Yoon added there is no need to predict Japan's next move because it must submit a progress report by the end of 2017, which will be reviewed by the World Heritage Committee the following year. If Japan's progress is deemed unsatisfactory, the sites could be removed from the UNESCO list. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Despite such claims from Japan, more solid evidence is piling up that Koreans were forced to work as slaves at the wartime sites. The latest is a 16-year-old report. Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
Yonhap News Agency reported on Friday that forced labor at Japanese industrial facilities was proven to be fact 16 years ago. The Seoul-based agency obtained the International Labor Organization report from March of 1999, which states that thousands of Koreans and Chinese were forcefully mobilized to the industrial facilities during World War II. At the time, the ILO labeled the forced mobilization as a violation of the convention. The report lists numerous testimonies of mistreatment and harsh working conditions, which resulted in many deaths. The fatality rate of workers averaged roughly 18%, with some facilities at nearly 29%. The report also revealed that, unlike what was promised, most workers received little or no pay. The statement read by the Japanese ambassador to UNESCO on Sunday acknowledged that there were a large number of Koreans and others that were forced to work. The ILO's Forced Labor Convention states, the term forced or compulsory labor shall mean any work for service under the menace penalty, which a person has not offered voluntarily. However, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga maintains that the work at the facility did not constitute a violation. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Let's talk about defense now. The U.S. Army has confirmed that it's going to reduce the number of troops to 450,000 over the next 2 years due to budget cuts. Initially, it was announced American troops in South Korea will not be affected. However, our Na Young-kyung reports that may not be the case. Take a look.
From October, the U.S. Army will gradually begin cutting the number of active duty troops by 40,000. By 2017, the number of troops will have dropped from the current 490,000 to 450,000, the smallest number since 1940. USA Today reported about the cuts earlier this week, but citing military sources in Washington, Korean media outlets said the number of American troops in South Korea would remain the same. However, following the U.S. Army's official announcement in Virginia on Thursday, that information might have been wide of the mark.
Unfortunately, under sequestration and automatic budget cuts, today's announcement may not be the last. Unless the provisions of the Budget Control Act are changed or reversed, the Army will have to cut an additional 30,000 soldiers by 2019.
U.S. Army officials say this will affect nearly every Army installation inside and outside of the United States. And experts and critics say the consequences of the budget-driven decision will extend far beyond the Korean Peninsula. Senator John McCain, chairman of the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee, has called the plan dangerous. And Randy George, the Army official who led Thursday's press conference, also added later that the extra cuts could put the U.S. at significant risk. Since 2012, the U.S. Army has already cut 80,000 soldiers, shuttering 13 brigade combat teams, including 2 in Germany and 1 in South Korea. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
The IMF expects the global economy to grow at the slowest pace this year since the 2009 global financial crisis. It says it's because of the sluggish growth in the United States, while urging advanced economies to pump more money into their economies. Sun Jung-in has the details.
In its revised World Economic Outlook released on Thursday, the IMF lowered its growth forecast for the global economy this year to 3.3%, down from its April prediction of 3.5%. The latest figure represents the slowest pace of growth since it dipped below zero in 2009 during the height of the global financial crisis. The organization identified the U.S. economy's weaker than expected first quarter performance as the main reason for its trimmed outlook. The IMF cut its U.S. growth forecast for the year to 2.5% from 3.1%. As for China, the fund left its forecast unchanged at 6.8%, saying the recent stock market rout there pales in size to China's massive economy.
The first one is the puncture of what was rather obviously a stock market bubble. Stock markets had increased by 150% in less than a year.
The IMF also maintained its forecast for a pickup in growth in the Eurozone at 1.5%, as it predicts the debt crisis in Greece will have a marginal effect on the global economy.
The mechanical links between Greece and the rest of the world are limited, be it on the trade side or the finance side. That's reassuring.
The organization advised advanced economies to keep accommodative monetary policy measures in place to support economic activity and boost inflation. Korea's growth forecast was not included in the revised outlook, but was set at 3.3% in April. Sun Jung-in, Arirang News.
4 new duty-free stores are set to open in the capital's Seoul and Korea's southernmost Jeju-do Island. The businesses are, of course, expected to give a big boost in Korea's tourism industry. Our Kwon-so reports on who withstood the fierce competition and won that golden ticket.
And the winners are HDC Silla Duty Free, Hanwha Galleria Time World, SM Duty Free, and Jeju Tourism Organization. These 4 out of 21 candidates have been approved for new duty-free businesses in Korea. The government granted the coveted licenses for the first time in 15 years. Korea Customs Service evaluated the businesses on factors like management abilities, tourism infrastructure, support for smaller companies, contribution to society, and a very crucial 5-minute presentation a day prior to the announcement. Competition was fierce during the bidding process, as the new duty-free stores are expected to rake in at least 1 trillion won, or roughly $900 million annually, due to the big demand from tourists, especially from China.
The domestic duty-free market showed an average growth of 15% in the last 3 years. But due to the little supply of duty-free shops, there was a lot of crowdedness and inconvenience for users.
Currently, there are 6 urban duty-free stores in Seoul. 2 retail giants and 1 SME are now required to complete their preparations to start their business within the next 6 months, and 1 on Jeju-do Island.
We're planning to create Korea's biggest duty-free store using 12,000 square meters of our iPark Mall and make it into a tourism hub, especially as there are many tourist attractions in the area, such as Itaewon Street, the National Museum of Korea, and Namsan Park.
Despite the strict evaluation behind closed doors, analysts seem to have predicted the outcome, as Hanwha stocks closed off 30% higher than Thursday and Shilla's nearly 9%. The government expects almost $270 billion of investment into the businesses, 4,000 new jobs to be created, and leaping into surpassing the 20 million mark in terms of annual tourists. Kwon-so, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea is getting ready to launch a new index of 30 blue-chip companies that represent the country's economic structure. The K-Top 30, as it's called, aims to better reflect Korea's economy. Unfortunately, some are already questioning if this new index will be able to achieve its ambitious goal. Our Kim Min-ji helped us delve deeper.
The K-Top 30 index, modeled after the U.S. Dow Jones Industrial Average, will launch next week. It will consist of 30 major companies chosen based on their market capitalization, such as Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, and SK Hynix, as well as financial groups and IT companies.
It's our hope that the K-Top 30 index will become a leading index that can help invigorate the Korean economy.
The launch comes amid calls for the local stock market to better reflect the country's economic growth. Since 1980, Korea's GDP has grown 36-fold, while the main Kospi index has only risen 19-fold. The K-Top 30 will only include companies with shares priced at less than 500,000 won, or roughly $440 in order to promote active trading. Samsung Electronics, whose share price is well over $1,000, will be subject to adjustment.
We have decided to bring on Samsung Electronics. However, we will apply an adjustment calculation of 0.5 to its share price to limit its position when generating the index.
The next question is how effective the new index will actually be. In addition to the benchmark Kospi, the local bourse operator runs over 130 sub-indices, including the Kospi 200. But these smaller indices have existed more or less in name only, as they are less popular among investors because they don't reflect real market conditions.
We need confirmation that the new index can guarantee stable returns. Instead of seeking immediate recognition, it would be better to think of its development in the long term.
The index's fate will now depend on how many financial products related to it are created and how fast they are sold. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, in Hong Kong, a strain of influenza is raising red flags in the region, claiming around 560 lives this year alone. Some even insist that it's more dangerous than the MERS virus because this strain can be spread by airborne transmission. Kim Ji-yeon brings us this report.
Hong Kong influenza, the H3N2 virus, is spreading at an alarming rate in the region. The symptoms include high fever, nausea, and diarrhea, with the possibility of complications even resulting in death. Just last month, 40 patients succumbed to the virus.
Since Hong Kong influenza is transmitted through the air, it's significantly more contagious than the MERS virus. Those who contract the influenza may show similar symptoms to MERS in the initial stages, so misdiagnosis is possible.
Hong Kong health authorities recommend getting vaccinated and avoiding crowded places with poor ventilation. Despite the development of vaccines, it may prove futile in the containment of the spread. Local experts in Korea say it's imperative health authorities devise preventative measures against the H3N2 virus early on.
There's a high possibility vaccines will not work on the H3N2 once the strain of the virus mutates, which is highly likely.
The Korean Foreign Ministry has already issued a safety warning for those visiting Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Tourism Commission says 60.8 million tourists paid a visit to the city last year alone. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And for the top international headlines, we now connect to our Lee Sun-ho at the News Center.
Our focus today, Greece party lawmakers meet to discuss a final plan to avert a financial disaster. Nations failed to meet a deadline over Iran's nuclear deal, and skin cells can now be turned into stem cells to fight tumors.
Interesting stories, but Sun-ho, let's start with the story in Greece, a country that's never proud to beg for another bailout package. Can you give us the latest?
Well, in a last-ditch effort, Greece's ruling Syriza party lawmakers met early on Friday to discuss on a financial proposal in return for aid. Now, this comes as Greece requested a new 53.5 billion euro bailout package. Lawmakers spent the morning hours talking about a number of measures for this decisive bailout package, with some expressing high hopes.
We're optimistic. We're optimistic for a very good agreement.
However, as the meeting progressed, it became painfully clear that there were stark differences in opinions over the proposal. Most objections arose from not wanting to include any more austerity measures that have already been mentioned. For instance, Culture Minister Nikos Zigdakis called the measures as very tough, and even went as far as saying that they were dealing with an intransigent Germany. Joining the meeting was, of course, Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, who stressed that sealing the deal was the nation's #1 priority. Negotiators failed to meet a deadline set for Friday morning regarding Iran's nuclear talks, but U.S. Secretary of State and Iran's foreign minister said the talks will most likely continue on into the weekend. This means that the Republican-dominated U.S. Congress will now have 60 instead of 30 days to review the deal. Obama's administration worries that this might actually derail the deal. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry already suggested on Thursday that an agreement was unlikely just hours ahead of the deadline set by the U.S. Congress for a quick review.
But let me assure you, we would not be here continuing to negotiate just for the sake of negotiating. We're here because we believe we are making real progress toward a comprehensive deal.
During the past 2 weeks, Iran and 6 other nations, namely the U.S., the U.K., France, Germany, Russia, and China, extended deadlines twice to complete the nuclear agreement. Now, Kerry constantly warned that the U.S.'s patience was limited during his statements. Western countries accuse Iran of seeking the capability to build nuclear weapons, while Tehran says its program is peaceful. And exciting new developments in the area of health and science. Researchers from North Carolina State University have successfully converted skin cells into stem cells for the purpose of fighting off brain tumors. They were able to do this by loading the stem cells with the anti-cancer drug and having them incubated on a scaffolding which mimics patterns in the brain.
First of all, mouse cells. So we took mouse skin and converted it into mouse. They're called induced neural stem cells.
From here, the researchers can implant the cells into cavities where the tumor is located. They say the scaffolds allow the cells to live longer inside the patients, and then these stem cells can then target in on the cancerous ones. Progress so far is showing promise.
In our initial testing, we were able to extend the survival of mice with human brain tumors from 25 days to almost 65 days. So we really think this approach is feasible.
Hinton says that it'll take a couple more years for clinical trials to take place, but he's positive this will provide a huge boost in the ongoing battle against cancer. And that's all for your international news update. I'll see you again tomorrow.
It was a really hot Friday here in Seoul, with the mercury topping out at 34.3 degrees Celsius, and a heat wave advisory of this season being issued for Seoul and still in effect in the capital as well as Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces. And further south, a high seas watch from Typhoon Chen-hom is still in effect in waters around Jeju Island. And Saturday looks to be even hotter than today, with temperatures going up to 35 degrees Celsius here in Seoul under partly to mostly sunny skies. But thankfully, relief is on the way with a much-needed rain nationwide in Sunday's forecast. In fact, monsoon rain will start in Jeju tomorrow morning, gradually move northward to cover the entire nation by Sunday, and the rain should linger until Tuesday morning. And the amount of rainfall will range between 50 to 200 millimeters, finally providing some relief from the current drought in the upper parts of the country. On that note, let's take a closer look at tomorrow's temperature. While Seoul will be blistering, the rest of the nation will be a tad cooler than today. Daegu and Gwangju will peak at 29 and 30, and Busan tops out at 27. And as for the other parts, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 32 and 25, while Dokdo rises to 26. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Near that beach, there are two giant rocks divided by waters. Legend has it they appeared after a couple deeply in love, torn by war, passed away.
During low tide, the two rocks are actually joints. It's quite interesting. Hopefully, the two Koreas will see a permanent low tide that reconnects them as one. Well, that brings us to the end of our newscast for this week. Thank you so much for staying with us. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Have a great weekend, and please join us at the same time next week. Goodbye for now.